CJRed presents Accidental Proposal by CJRed. Chapter 36. Epilogue. Draco paced outside the door to the hospital, his eyes wild. "They kicked me out!" His mother sighed dramatically. "You threatened to strangle the healer, unless he made childbirth stop hurting. That's not possible, my dragon. Now calm down, and I am sure they will let you back in." "Draco!" At Hermione's yell, Draco rushed back in as Narcissa shared an amused look with Molly Weasley, who was there to support Hermione. The women had formed a strange truce over the years. "He is worse than Blaise was with Ginny," Molly said absently. Narcissa sighed. "His father was thrown out of my birthing room 3 times, I think." Molly snorted. "Arthur fainted each time, and every time, and with the twins, we had to give him a calming draught." Narcissa rolled her eyes. "Wizards," she said in exasperation. 10 minutes later, Draco walked out with a blue bundle, his eyes full of tears as everyone stood up. It was only immediate family, which meant his parents and the elder Weasleys. Hermione hadn't wanted everyone making a fuss over her. "I have a son," Draco said with a catch in his voice. "A son," Lucius said, walking over to touch the baby's head softly. Molly stood up and slipped into the room to check on Hermione, followed by Arthur, who patted Draco on the shoulders as he went. He is so beautiful," Draco whispered reverently. Narcissa wiped at her eyes and then smiled as the baby let out a lusty wail. "And probably hungry. Take him back to Hermione, love." Draco smirked. "Rascal just ate. Will you head home?" Narcissa hesitated and looked to Lucius, who said formally, "Hermione is well?" Draco nodded. "She is fine. Perfectly, actually. A bit sleepy is all." Lucius nodded. "We will return to France and see you there." Draco smirked and turned around. His father was still wary of his wife. It hadn't helped that in pregnancy Hermione had taken to hexing her father-in-law twice as often. But ironically, the two seemed to be forming some kind of weird respect for the other. She didn't disfigure his father anymore. Molly and Arthur left quickly, both kissing the baby boy, as Draco laid him back on Hermione's breast, where he fumbled a moment, and then latched on hungrily. Hermione smiled down at him, and then shook her head. "I am lucky they have a charm to ensure I never run out of milk for him. He is very hungry after all that work," she said fondly, stroking her son's downy blonde curls. "I think you did all the work, love, and I have utterly changed my mind about 5 children. Hermione laughed softly, smiling up at him. "You are silly. I thought I was going to have to hex you. Come and lay down with us." Draco paused, but then sighed and snuggled in next to her, wrapping an arm around her still rounded stomach. "Thank you for our son," he said, kissing her cheek gently. She sighed and closed her eyes, taking his hand. "He has a rune, right on his left bum cheek. The Mediwitch told me after you took him out." Draco sat up and pulled down the swaddling blanket and cloth diaper, and then laughed. "It matches ours. That should be interesting for the poor sod when he enters school." Hermione chuckled and then snuggled into him, stifling a yawn. "So what name shall we decide on?" "Scorpius William Malfoy," Draco said softly. "William for your father. I am so sorry he couldn't be here." Hermione teared up and then laughed happily. "Scorpius, so he matches his father with the odd first name?" Draco snorted, kissing her deeply before sitting back to watch his son fall asleep. "Well, yes, of course. It's a tradition, after all." Hermione snorted as she fell asleep, knowing her husband would watch over her and little Scorpius. 3 years later. "Really, Draco? Again?" his mother said sternly as the wizard was shoved out by a Mediwitch. Draco turned and huffed out an annoyed breath. "Damn it! She is screaming louder than she did with Scorpius. Why won't she take the bloody pain potion?" Molly snorted and then sighed. "It can cause contractions to stop. Why don't you invent one that doesn't have that side effect?" Draco's eyes went wide, and he snapped his fingers before turning on his heel and marching back into the room. "He probably will spend the next few years before they have another child inventing that potion, Molly dear," Arthur said with amusement. Molly laughed and shared a look with Narcissa. An hour later, Draco walked out looking stunned. "A daughter?" he said quietly. Bloody hell, a girl. Lucius stood up and strode over, pulling the blanket away from the babe to see for himself. A girl? He exclaimed in shock. Molly frowned. Were you told it was a boy, dear? I thought you two wanted to be surprised. Narcissa was crying. No, it's just that we haven't had a girl in the Malfoy line in 300 years, Lucius said, interrupting her and holding out his hands. May I, Draco? Draco handed over his daughter and slouched against the wall, looking stunned. She's tired, but fine, he said to Molly, who stood up and rushed into the room to check on Hermione. A girl, Lucius repeated again. We have a witch. Draco laughed. Yeah, one who will go to a co-ed magical school with a bunch of hormonal wizards, father. Lucius looked up and handed over his granddaughter. Salazar, help us. Narcissa snorted and walked over to kiss her granddaughter. Oh, stop, both of you. Draco, we will see you at home later tomorrow. Draco nodded and headed back into the room with his still sleeping daughter. Hermione was bidding goodbye to the Weasleys, who kissed the little girl and smiled at Draco as they left. Draco got in bed and handed their daughter off to Hermione, who cuddled her onto her chest. I wasn't expecting a girl, he said honestly. Hermione giggled. I know. You about fainted when they told you that you had a daughter. What do we do about names? Draco shook his head. I have no idea, love. Hermione sighed and kissed her daughter's blonde head, also curly, poor child. If she has my curls, Hermione mused. Draco chuckled and played with the soft curl. She was born on call. That's good luck in the wizarding world. Hermione closed her eyes, relaxing against him. I know it's rare for a baby to be born in the amniotic sac in the Muggle world, too. Maybe that means she didn't get my curls after all. Draco snorted at her. Cute, he said, pulling at her curls before he watched his daughter for a long moment, and then asked, It's an odd name and not constellation, but what about Haven? Hermione looked up in surprise. Haven? Draco nodded. Yes, she was born still in her Haven. I like Haven. Hermione thought it over before she nodded. I like it too. What about a middle name? Jean, after her mother, the witch who brought the first Malfoy witch into the family tree by birth in over 300 years, Draco said firmly. Hermione looked at him and then nodded. Okay, Jean. She is Haven Jean Malfoy. 2 years later. Well, he hasn't been kicked out yet. Do you think the potion worked? Was asked in a bored tone by Lucius Malfoy. Narcissa snorted. It was tested thoroughly on every cat in France, I fear. I am sure it worked perfectly. Molly laughed. Hermione wouldn't have taken it unless she knew it would. Arthur nodded at that, and they all looked up as the baby cried. 10 minutes later, Draco walked out, stunned. Another daughter. Salazar, help me. Everyone burst into laughter. Hermione smiled as she took her daughter into her arms and nursed her. I think we should name her Helena, but I have no idea of anything for a middle name. Claire? Draco asked, touching his daughter's soft blonde curls. They are all blonde. Where is my little mini you? Hermione laughed. They all have my curls, tragically. Draco scoffed and smiled down at the little one. Helena Claire Malfoy. I like it. Hermione snuggled into him and yawned. I can't do this again for at least 3 years, so don't get any ideas. I am exhausted. Draco laughed. I think we can wait a few more years, love. If you wish to have more children, when she is 3, we will consider it. 4 years later. It's a boy, Draco said proudly, brandishing his second son. Good. He can help even things out. Molly and Narcissa laughed heartily as Lucius and Arthur nodded. Hermione was chuckling at him still when he brought the babe back in and settled him on her breast, where he started to nurse again. So, I picked Helena's first name. What have you got for this little guy? Would you hate me if I said Severus? Hermione looked up shocked. No, I wouldn't. But I think your father might be a bit put out. Draco chewed on his bottom lip, and Hermione sighed, knowing exactly what he wished to do. Oh, go on then. Severus Lucius Malfoy. His grandpapas will be beyond thrilled. Draco kissed her hard on the lips. Thank you, my love. Hermione closed her eyes. Well, 4 is all you are getting, so I suppose he shall have to bear your father's middle name, as Scorpius has mine. Draco chuckled and hugged her to him. Get some rest, and then we will go home. 4 is plenty for me, my love. Hermione let out a tired sigh and drifted off to sleep. Hogwarts Express. Hermione and Draco herded Scorpius, Haven, Helena, and Severus, all with trunks towards the platform. Scorpius was head boy, and ran first, followed by his prefect of a sister, and then Helena gestured for Severus to go first, and followed behind. In true Malfoy fashion, Scorpius had ended up in Slytherin, but to the great shock of everyone but Hermione, Haven had gone to Ravenclaw. And Helena, who was the feistiest of their brood, had gone to Gryffindor. She smiled at her husband as they walked through the platform barrier to see the Hogwarts Express in all its glory. Don't worry. Severus will go to Slytherin or faint from concentrating so hard to make the hat put him there. Draco snorted at that, but nodded. I don't doubt it. After the shock of Helena, he wouldn't want to send his grandpapas into an early grave. Hermione grinned. All of you are ridiculous, you know. How could you think that one of our children wouldn't end up in scarlet and gold like their mother? Draco grumbled. It would be one of your girls. Hermione elbowed him playfully. Oh, stop it. Helena went to Ravenclaw and you were thrilled. Yes, well, she is bloody brilliant. Hermione rolled her eyes. Are you saying Helena is not? Draco grinned now. Brilliant on the Quidditch pitch. Hermione shook her head. Their youngest daughter had made the team her second year. She was a brilliant flyer, utterly fearless on a broom. And seeing you in red and gold at her games is shocking enough, I might add, whispered Hermione. Her husband had become a governor of the wizarding school Scorpius's first year. To his great disappointment, none of his children had cared a fig about Quidditch except Helena, and that meant that Helena had spent the most time with her father, which made her house placement all the more shocking. Hermione bent down to kiss her youngest son, who was standing, looking a bit daunted by the train. What if I hate school, Mum? Severus whispered fearfully. Hermione sighed and hugged her sweet boy to her chest. You won't. Remember what Uncle Harry said. Just tell the hat that you really want Slytherin, and Scorpius will be there, and so is Albus. You will be fine. Severus nodded and then said, You will write to me, right? Hermione chucked him under the chin. Every day if you wish. We all will. Now go on. Go and get on the train. Draco leaned down and hugged his son, whispering something in his ear that caused Severus to grin and then run off. What did you tell him? Hermione asked curiously. Draco shrugged. A Slytherin secret. You can't write him every day, love. Hermione snorted. They had this argument every time they sent a child off to school for the first year. Watch me. Draco laughed, and pulling her to him, he kissed her soundly before they both turned to watch the train, carrying all their children head off to Hogwarts. Shall we make another one? Draco whispered, handing her a cloth to wipe her tears. Hermione groaned at him. No. Draco smirked. Just thought I would offer, dear. Hermione rolled her eyes and linked her arm through his. I am comforting myself with the knowledge that we can now make love anywhere we want to in our home for the next 4 months. She laughed as her husband turned and on the spot apparated her back to their townhome in Paris. They did indeed make love in every room of the townhouse, but only for a few months before Hermione took Severus up on his offer to get her second mastery. Draco, not to be outdone by his wife, got a mastery in arithmancy. Thankfully, this time around, there was no need for lengthy separations. The end.